Hi, my name is Jimmy, and I work at the University Writing Center. Today I will be discussing the degrees of comparison for adjectives. The degrees of comparison for adjectives are different forms of adjectives that allow you to describe one object by itself or in relation to other objects. There are three different degrees: the positive, which is the basic form of the adjective, the comparative, and the superlative. These can be seen in easy, easier, and easiest, respectively. The comparative allows you to compare two objects, and the superlative allows you to compare three or more objects. The number of syllables in the positive form usually determines the form for the comparative and superlative. Let's look at an example of this. For instance, the adjective warm has one syllable, so it will take the common er comparative ending and the est superlative ending. In most cases, positives with two syllables will also use the er and est endings. For example, simple, simpler, simplest. For words with three syllables, you will place the word more before the comparative and the word most before the superlative. For instance, powerful, more powerful, most powerful. The syllable rules are fairly consistent, but sometimes there are exceptions. For two-syllable positives, there are some situations where more and most may be as acceptable as the er and est endings, or even better choices. For instance, with the two-syllable positive common, it is correct to say commoner and commonest, as well as more common and most common. In such a dilemma, the best methods are seeing which forms are used most commonly in books and journal articles, and consulting your instructor to see which form he or she prefers. Also, you may want to remember that positives ending in y, ow, and le usually take er and est endings. Finally, you should be aware of some of the irregular forms. These may look arbitrary to a non-native English speaker. This is understandable considering that the positives listed here bear little resemblance to their comparatives and superlatives. Note that some of the comparatives do not take the normal er endings, and some of the superlatives do not use est. Pause the screencast if you need to make note of these irregular one-syllable adjectives. Be careful not to use empty comparisons, in which you omit the second object which is being compared. A sentence like, "This technique is better and more efficient," leaves the reader asking, "Better than what?" Here in this table are a few common constructions used for comparison. The most common may be the comparative plus than, which is used for general comparatives, as in, "This quiz was easier than the last quiz." If you want to indicate that two objects are no different from each other in a certain quality, use the as plus adjective plus and construction. For example, bikes are as fun as skateboards. Similarly, if you want to indicate one object is at least equal to, if not greater to, the other in terms of equality, use the just as plus adjective plus as construction. In the example, "That test was just as difficult as the last one," the indication is that that test might have been more difficult than the last one. Finally, if you want to show one object has less of a quality than another object, use the not as plus adjective plus as construction. The example, "The water was not as cold as the soda," indicates that the soda was colder than the water. When you are describing matters of quantity, using fewer and less, it is helpful to remember these tips on countable and uncountable nouns. Briefly, a countable noun is one you could put a cardinal number in front of. Dog is countable, as in, "I have 2 dogs." An uncountable noun cannot have a number put in front of it. For example, "I have done research," rather than "I have done 2 researches." When using fewer, you should pair it with countable nouns. Notice in the example, "This season has 3 fewer games than the fall season." I was able to use a number before fewer because I can count the number of baseball games in a season. Whereas when you use less, pair it with uncountable nouns. The example does not give a numerical amount of research, but rather a general quantity. In review, for one-syllable positives, remember to use the comparative er and the superlative est endings. For two- or three-syllable positives, use more before comparatives and most before superlatives. Also, beware of the differences between academic and colloquial speech so you can avoid incorrect uses of best and empty comparisons in your papers. Note that two-syllable positives can sometimes use more and most, as well as er and est, for their comparatives and superlatives. Finally, when describing quantities, remember to use fewer with countable nouns and less with uncountable nouns. Thank you for viewing this Write Right screencast.